Hello there everyone, it's your old pal Cape Joel welcoming you back to another installment of The Story So Far, a show that, unlike my other comic book videos where I take very short vertical slices of comic book stories that are going on now, and instead kind of slow things down, stretch it out a little bit, and talk about storylines that have just finished up in more depth. And for this week's episode, we are once again talking about another arc of The Punisher from Matthew Rosenberg. In fact, before starting, I actually wasn't aware that this is his final arc. It's called War on the Streets, but like I said, it just finished up, so the collected version, which is going to be volume 4, could be called anything by the time this story actually comes out. To get people up to speed in case they haven't been reading, or if they didn't watch my episode on Volume 3 of the Rosenberg Punisher story, basically Frank was taken captive in Bugalia, the nation run by the current head of Hydra, Baron Zemo. There he was tortured, but he managed to escape and raise something of a rebel army to fight back against old purple sock mask face. Now, as we join the beginning of this story, which starts in issue 12 and goes all the way to issue number 16, Frank is on a desert island. He's near death after falling in the water after trying to latch onto Zemo's plane at the end of the previous arc. He's near death, but he's actually rescued by some very unlikely people. A bunch of Hydra deserters, some of which he even actually knows. Some of these people are actually political prisoners who were in the same prison in Bugalia as Frank was. They left the group and then quickly joined right back up again to try and save their own skin and hopefully try and immigrate to America. Needless to say, Frank is pretty unhappy with these guys. And in fact, the way Frank ultimately deals with the Hydra deserters sets kind of a benchmark and sets up an ongoing theme that's going to be explored throughout this arc, and that is how exactly Frank deals with people. You see, Hydra reinforcements are coming to the island, and so he's able to get all of these guys together to put up a kind of guerrilla front because they know if they're running away, they're probably going to be shot too. This is a fun little segment because Frank Castle goes into straight-on Rambo mode, rigging the island with explosives and traps, and he makes a bunch of arrows. It's all very fun stuff. Ultimately, though, even after the Punisher gets what he wants and is able to steal a boat and make it back to America, he still kills a couple of the deserters even though they were fighting next to him a minute ago. Like I said, setting up a theme, the Punisher can always surprise you, and when he does surprise you, it's usually pretty brutal and not too nice. Now, Baron Zemo actually managed to beat the Punisher back to New York, and if you've been reading a lot of Marvel Comics right now, you'll know that the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, just so happens to be the mayor of New York right now, so naturally Zemo decides to look him up and hope to get some help. What's cool about this is that Fisk has absolutely zero time for Zemo. He does not like him at all. He thinks he's a poor businessman, he thinks he's a poor leader, he thinks he's a guy who inherited his name, inherited his fortune, and yet even despite all of that, he's just squandering it. So, you know, you have old money versus new money of the criminal underworld. But Fisk still has to work with him, though, if only to keep him quiet, because the Kingpin is still trying right now to make it look like he's a legitimate mayor, and he just can't have the leader of Hydra stomping around his city and causing trouble, especially when he knows that Zemo being here means the Punisher is going to be after him anytime soon. Much like in the last arc, too, what's fun about what Rosenberg does with Zemo is that he makes him darkly funny, and that these scenes with him and Kingpin are essentially just villainous dick measuring and dick waving. Also, too, I was a huge fan of Matthew Rosenberg's criminally underrated Kingpin miniseries, and I was really hoping to see some connective tissue between that story and this one. You get it, but you get it in kind of an unsatisfying way. We actually do kind of learn the fate of Sarah Dewey, Kingpin's autobiographer and maybe love interest. He says that she's dead in this story, which really hurt me. Now, I don't know if that's Kingpin being facetious or not, but still, I really would have liked to have seen more of that story get connected here. Also, too, for those of you who are wondering, oh, are we finally going to get to see the Punisher go up against the Kingpin in a big, meaningful way in this story? No, actually. In fact, they don't actually meet up until the end, which is slightly disappointing. Now, the Punisher is barely back in New York for 15 minutes when he gets accosted by a group of cops, and I'm pretty sure you think you know where this is going. They're going to try and arrest him, right? Because he's a wanted criminal, even more so now after the assassination of the Mandarin a few arcs back. But no, these are different types of cops. These cops love the Punisher. In fact, they're big old Punisher fanboys, right down to having his skull logo all over their cruisers. And if this seems like something you may have heard of, Yeah, cops in real life do this. And it's just as disconcerting in real life as it is here in the comic. Even Jerry Conway, the creator of The Punisher, has railed on social media about how just wrong-headed and really messed up that is for cops and soldiers and people to, really love and venerate The Punisher when they shouldn't because, he's the ultimate cautionary tale. And here in this story, Matthew Rosenberg basically meets this thing head-on with The Punisher ripping up the logo from their cars and saying, hey, you want a hero? Go look up to Captain America. Do not look up to me. I am crazy, in case you couldn't tell. I did not choose to uphold, to protect, and serve. You guys did. Do your damn job, and if you don't, I'll be seeing you again very soon. The Punisher, of course, having a very complicated history with the cops in Marvel Comics. Sometimes he swears not to kill cops, but that doesn't stop him from doing it anyway. Sometimes it's a whole big thing, and here we actually get to see it explored in a pretty meaningful way. I like now that we actually have something that we can point to in continuity to say, yes, this is how the Punisher feels about the police. Now, what is exactly Baron Zemo's plan for New York and the Kingpin? Well, it's actually kind of clever. Because he is still the deposed leader of a foreign nation, one that he kind of blowed up to gain sympathy, he's going to disguise a bunch of Hydra soldiers as UN troops so he can bring weapons and more of his men into New York City. He's going to dress them up like UN troops, so if the Punisher starts killing them, as he is wont to do, he'll look like an even bigger bad guy right now. Fisk wants a piece of this too, not wanting Zemo to outdo him, and so he vows to bring back the Vigil group, which is an anti-vigilante group from 90s Punisher stories. They had ridiculous costumes in, and they're a really, really deep pull here. But we don't actually get it, though, because Zemo blindsides Mayor Fisk again by saying, you know what? To help out these UN troops, I'm also re-establishing the Thunderbolts, like the original OG Thunderbolts. Not like the Marvel version of the Suicide Squad under Norman Osborn that I think most people are familiar with. I'm talking like, the original ones where all these bad guys pretended to be superheroes to dupe the public. They never do actually mention how the public feels about the Thunderbolts team coming back again with more or less the same lineup. But, there it is. Now, it's at this point, too, that Black Widow ends up approaching the Punisher. Naturally, Natasha doesn't like the idea of literal jackbooted thugs walking all over New York City, but the Punisher doesn't know how to feel. He still thinks they're UN guys, and he also doesn't quite trust Black Widow right now because she was working with Nick Fury. Nick Fury was the one who sold him out to Baron Zemo and got him locked up in Bugalia in the first place. Basically, Nick Fury is, for all intents and purposes, the main villain of the Rosenberg Punisher run, if you want to break it down. Turns out, though, the Hydra UN guys aren't very smart at all because they literally wore their green and yellow uniforms under their UN uniforms, which means when the Punisher does start killing them and does start routing them in the street, it's very easy for people to tell, oh yeah, wait, Hydra is behind this. Even Kingpin is upset, too, because he hoped that if he was able to bring in the Punisher after all the bad stuff he's done, that he would be greeted as a hero. Now that's not going to happen, which gives him yet another reason to hate Baron Zemo and want him out of his city that much faster. Eventually, the newly reformed Thunderbolts are able to track the Punisher down, and while Frank is still very good, he is ultimately, at the end of the day, one man, while the Thunderbolts are many superpowered individuals, which makes the fight that much more dangerous. He's almost killed, too, until Black Widow is able to swoop on in and save him. Natasha has her own ideas, too. If Punisher is going to go up against Zemo, who called in his old friends, maybe it's time for the Punisher to call in some friends of his own. The only problem is the Punisher doesn't have many friends, or if he does, he's terrible at keeping them. But all the same, Black Widow managed to recruit Moon Knight, who, don't you love Moon Knight? He's getting a show soon, so he should get some more pushes in there. And Night Thrasher. Yeah, the guy with the skateboard. He's here too. Maybe Frank should make some more friends, eh? You might also be thinking to yourself, too, wait a minute, the Punisher and a team of anti-heroes versus the original Thunderbolts? Is this harkening back to the time when Punisher was himself on an incarnation of the Thunderbolts, or Thunderbolts Red, as I like to call them, because everyone on it had a Red's color scheme? I certainly like to think so, and that's not the only thing from the Punisher's past that Matthew Rosenberg manages to dig up here, because we see Rachel Alvers show up here. Yes, Yes, that's right, from the Greg Rucka run. I'm guessing a lot of people don't remember her, but she was the female Punisher sidekick, who I guess some people have dubbed Lady Punisher, but she never really got that name. A lot was kind of left unsaid between these two characters, and still sort of remains unsaid here in this arc, but it is definitely cool to see her come back again and to see that, yeah, someone actually remembers this character. Now, after the Punisher slipped through his fingers yet again, Zemo gets a brand new idea, and that is sitting on his hands and doing nothing in hopes that his many henchmen will soften the Punisher up so he can swoop on in for the kill. Although personally, I like to think Zemo is just afraid now after the Punisher literally chased him out of his own country, chased him everywhere, and he's just hoping no one realizes how scared he is. Well, Fisk realizes, though. In fact, Fisk starts swinging his own Kingpin dick around, saying, hey, you better go out there and do something or I'm not going to harbor you anymore. And wouldn't you know it, ultimately in the Battle of the Bad Guys, it's Kingpin who ends up victorious, and Zemo in his full-on Citizen V attire has to join the fight. This leads to a very cool and very clever little action scene wherein Zemo is directing a tank to chase the Punisher and our heroes through the winding streets of New York, and they just can't quite do it because a tank was not meant to ever roll through the streets of New York. It's at this point everything comes to a head in a big, large, protracted battle wherein everybody fights everybody and everybody gets to show off, except maybe for Zemo's Thunderbolts, who do kind of feel like a bit of an afterthought here, though we do get a truly hilarious joke wherein the Fixer, one of the longest tenured member on any versions of the Thunderbolts, says, ah yes, Punisher, I've been waiting for us to finally have a duel, only for Frank to kill him and go, dude, I don't even know who you are. It's during all of this chaos, though, Rachel actually steps on in to try and save the Punisher from Zemo, which only serves to actually get her kidnapped by Zemo. But this isn't your traditional damsel in distress type of story wherein the villain says, yes, come and face me, Punisher, for our final confrontation. No, it's actually kind of played for dark laughs because Zemo runs off with the girl and the ghost, but leaves the rest of his team behind. Which, if you've been paying attention up until this point, when the Punisher is left alone with a group of ne'er-do-wells, obviously his first intention is to kill them all dead, because it's what they deserve, right? Night Thrasher, who hilariously becomes the voice of reason in this situation, says, hey, you know, we might be anti-heroes, we might be a little bit more hardcore, but I'm not going to murder someone for you, Punisher. In fact, if you do kill these guys, you can just go on ahead on your own, because we're not going to help you anymore, and this short-lived team is going to be even shorter-lived. And again, you think, oh, when given this choice, is Punisher gonna maybe learn a lesson? Is he maybe gonna, you know, try and even just maintain that he is a normal person in front of these other heroes if it means he can get Zemo his ultimate goal? Nah, actually, he's totally fine just being Frank and just being a killer. And again, keeping with this bigger theme, the Punisher will surprise you because the Punisher will almost always just do whatever he wants. He cannot be changed. Now, surprisingly, the whole team doesn't leave him. Danny Ketch, the Ghost Rider, decides to stick around, if only because as a Ghost Rider, it is his job to do the Penance Stares to killers, and who is a bigger killer than the Punisher? He gets hit with the Penance Stare, but really, for Frank, that's just like drinking a little bit of espresso, man. That's just, thank you, Danny, I needed that little pick-me-up. Oh, sure, the Penance Stare drives normal people to the brink of madness, but I, the Punisher, am not normal people, and I don't feel bad about anything I've done, so, you know. Now, Frank is so damn dedicated to getting Zemo and putting this crazy story to an end, he's willing to sacrifice his own body, launching himself off Ghost Rider's motorcycle through a plate glass window just so he can get on the same floor as the Hydra bad guy. At this point, too, we get the classic action movie stand-up, oh, don't come any closer or I'll kill the girl. Only again, this is Punisher we're dealing with here, and he is not your traditional action hero, so he willingly shoots through Rachel to shoot Zemo. Rachel doesn't hold it against him either. She's just like, oh, that's a pretty good shot, passed right through me. And you know what? I would do the same if I was you, because I'm also crazy like you. This leads to Punisher and Zemo having themselves a big fist fight. Zemo even gets unmasked during this, and once again, Rosenberg does an excellent job just painting Zemo as this really pathetic individual who's just like, why are you doing this to me? Why won't you stop? Do you want money? I'll give you money. I'll give you whatever you want. But the Punisher only wants one thing: Zemo dead. Now, to this point, too, you're probably saying to yourself, hey, didn't the Ghost stick around from the Thunderbolts? Yes, he did, and the Ghost ultimately saves Zemo from getting stabbed to death with his own sword by the Punisher, and that is because, well, Ghost is a straight-up mercenary, and he actually took money from Fisk. Yes, that's right. The Ghost was actually on Fisk's side. Fisk didn't want any more bodies on his hand. He just wanted Zemo to get the hell out of New York and stop being a problem for him. You know, get out of his no hair, if you will. But Zemo is so prideful and such a fanatic, really in his own way a dark mirror to the Punisher. He refuses to leave. He refuses to be done with Fisk, and when he won't listen to reason, Fisk has Zemo killed himself, in doing so robbing the Punisher of the prize that he has sought pretty much since the end of Secret Empire, when you really break it down. Of course, the Punisher isn't really someone to get hung up on this sort of thing. Oh, sure, he's mad he won't get to do Zemo in, but he has the famous Kingpin in front of him right now, and Kingpin he knows has done wrong, so he'll just kill him instead, even though doing so would mean that he would be killing the mayor of New York City, which, you know, is a pretty big deal, but considering he offed the Mandarin at the beginning of this story arc, you know, killing one political leader, killing another political reader. It's at this point right here, though, the story really gets interesting and really becomes a full circle, because Nick Fury Jr. shows up again, and he's brought with him his whole covert Avengers team, the one who have been really been tracking Punisher down since the whole War Machine debacle. Nick Fury Jr., for all intents and purposes, being the real villain of this story, and we really start to see the dichotomy between him and Punisher start to take shape, and that is, you know, Punisher does bad things, but he never argues that what he does is bad and that he should be punished for what he does. Nick Fury, on the other hand, does a lot of bad things, a lot of underhanded things, but still very much thinks himself the hero and thinks that he should be lauded and applauded for what he does. And so really what you have here is matter versus antimatter. Nick Fury isn't going to let the Punisher kill the Kingpin, but the Punisher isn't going to leave here until somebody is dead, and that person might actually surprise you who ends up dead. You see, the Punisher rushes the Kingpin, and it's Black Widow who actually takes up to defend him, shooting him to the point that he actually falls off the building. Now, for all intents and purposes, they assume Frank is dead. He fell to his death if the bullet itself didn't kill him. Of course, they never do recover the body, and Nick Fury Jr. is very skeptical as to where exactly Natasha's loyalties lie. After all, she's the one who reached out to the Punisher. She was the one who broke him out, and even though she swears up and down that, you know, she had nothing to do with this, the writing seems to be on the wall, and that is the Punisher is going to be slumbering for a bit now until he returns, perhaps sooner rather than later. And it's on that note right there the comic comes to a close, everyone. And so that was The Punisher Volume 4, War in the Streets by Matthew Rosenberg. And while I enjoyed it, I would be lying if I said I thought it was the strongest work he had turned in. I get the distinct feeling that they kind of had to wrap this story up and that it was probably meant to go on a little longer, if not have a third and final part. I do think, though, taken as a whole, the Rosenberg run from the War Machine stuff to this final arc right here actually does tell a pretty damn interesting story of the Punisher, the ultimate vigilante, the ultimate outsider in the Marvel hero spectrum, really kind of clashing with the rest of the universe and really kind of clashing with the hypocrisy of a lot of these other Avengers and superheroes who do get away with killing, but because they kill differently than he does, or at least, you know, listen to different types of masters than he does. I think it's kind of interesting and kind of funny. Also, too, even though this is quote-unquote the end of the Punisher, he's not going away at all. In fact, Garth Ennis will be writing a brand new run in the Max line very soon, and I will most definitely be excited to check that one out when I get the chance. And so, there you have it, everyone. Another installment of the story so far. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, down in the comment section below, tell me what other completed stories you would like to see me cover in greater depth next time. So until then, everyone, I will bid you a bye-bye.